Hi, good day again. By now, I'm assuming everyone would have read the two documents, both by Gregory Dees and by Jarabashi. So you should have a pretty good idea as to what social entrepreneurship is all about. So I'm just going to refresh on some of that so that we're pretty clear on terms of what social entrepreneurship is all about. For those who have not as yet addressed it, kindly note that you are required to put your understanding on the forums. The forums are being marked. So, and you have up to the end of this week in which to do it. So please do so as early as possible. Right. So we're going to talk a little bit in terms of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. What is entrepreneurship and what is social entrepreneurship? Now, what is entrepreneurship? We all did ENTP 210. So we all supposed to know what is entrepreneurship and who is an entrepreneur. So a little bit of refresher from that class. Some of you may or may not have met Professor Limberg, and Professor Limberg actually encompassed it in nicely in this diagram as a definition of who is an entrepreneur. And he was pretty clear as in terms of saying that every one of us is an entrepreneur. We were all born with those entrepreneurial capabilities. And therefore, what he's saying, it first starts with you being the self entrepreneur. And therefore, from a personal entrepreneurship standpoint, it's all about your attitude to change. It's all about how well you are an innovative, critical thinker, how well you deal with issues and change and problems. And therefore, based on that type of entrepreneurial mindset and having that goal for yourself and not letting problems be barriers but opportunities, that type of entrepreneurial mindset and that critical thinking capabilities allow you to, in a business environment, show choice as to be a business entrepreneur, meaning that you are starting and growing a current business, or if you are working in an existing business, you are a business intra entrepreneur, and therefore you help create the learning organization. And this is an organization that's continuously innovative. It's an organization who continuously look at the external environment and meet the need of the customers, and therefore they are flexible, they are innovative, they are creative, and therefore you as an employee in that type of organization contributes to the development of that organization. So entrepreneurship really is about creating value, and therefore in the personal context, it's about creating value for yourself first of all, and in the family environment, create value for your family. And therefore, in a business and context, if your choice is to work in a business environment, then of course to be creative and come up with new innovative product or processes to create a new enterprise, or in an existing business, be innovative, creative, and come up with innovative ideas to create existing product. And in fact, most of the most successful entrepreneurs are in fact intrapreneurs. The word itself, for those of you who could remember way back, and for those of you who read the document by Gregory Dees, where he pointed out the meaning of entrepreneurship by Schumpeter in terms of creating value and taking something of a lesser value and making it something of a greater value. And these also refer to Drucker, and Drucker say not everyone that we see or every small business that we see is an example of entrepreneurship. And Howard Stevenson going on and saying, well, it is actually proceeding without having all your resources under your control. And therefore, it's that creative, innovative, willing to take that kind of risk attitude that individual, and it's all a personal stuff, and that ability to be able to take calculated risks. And therefore you can do that by starting your own business, or in terms of creating a learning organization and be innovative in that perspective. And as I was mentioning, the most innovative and creative people are people who are in existing business, because they've got the information and the practices right there. The person who created the liquid paper was a secretary, and she was just tired of having to retype, and she came up with something to be able to cover over old mistakes and retype it. And therefore, because she experienced the problem, she looked for an innovative idea to solve the problem, and it creates sustainable value. Now, that same kind of mindset could also be applied in the public context. And therefore, for a public environment or a public based organization or a social based organization, you could be a social entrepreneur. And therefore, you create value in that context. Or you can choose to create your own social enterprise and be a social entrepreneur. That's the EN portion. So the EN is about starting something new. And again, if you revisit what Trumpeter was saying, Trumpeter was talking about a new product, a new process, and of course, a new business. But of course, society generally seem to think that the entrepreneur is somebody who starts a new business, and that definitely is not the case. An entrepreneur is someone who is creative, who is innovative, and create value in whichever context that he is in. And therefore, in the public environment, you could be a social entrepreneur and create social value. So in ENTP 210, hopefully you were introduced to that holistic perspective of entrepreneurship. And therefore, in this class, we are actually going to be looking at the genre of social, and in ENTP 210 was the genre of, you would have actually got the full mindset aspect of it from a personal standpoint. For those of you who have completed managing family enterprise, you look at it from a commercial standpoint and therefore from a business standpoint. So in this class, we are looking at it from a social standpoint. I think I mentioned Drucker already, and of course, Dees mentioned Drucker in his document. And in that document, he said that the entrepreneurs are characterized by their attitude to change. It's all about the personal competency, and therefore they react to that change, or they respond to change through social and economic innovation. And therefore it's all about creating value. So Drucker basically, and this is early as 1993. At that point in time, the field of social entrepreneurship was now evolving. The European Commission, and we know, of course, that there has been some little upheaval in Europe. And the European Commission originally was all the different countries in Europe together with the United Kingdom. And of course, last year the United Kingdom pulled out from the European Commission, but notwithstanding, the European Commission actually, they've been doing a lot of work with regards to entrepreneurship. They recognize the value of entrepreneurship, and then they said that entrepreneurship should not be considered just as a mean for creating new business, but it is an attitude. So they reinforce again the whole idea that entrepreneurship is an attitude, and therefore this attitude, which can be usefully, meaning create value, applied by everyone, and you can do it in your daily lives, and you can do it in all working conditions. So entrepreneurship basically has to be looked at from a holistic perspective: personal, economical, and social. And therefore, entrepreneurship from a personal context is about us improving our life as a personal competency. And therefore, having that entrepreneurial mindset is about creating value. And therefore, it's about creating economic value, again, back to Professor Lindbergh model. It's about creating value in a business context. It's about entrepreneurship in terms of creating a new business, or intrapreneurship in terms of developing an existing business. Or you can create value from a social context and therefore create social value. And therefore, this is about social entrepreneurship. It's about community development. It's about cultural development. It's about environmental development. This is about people who create sustainable change. So if we look at Maria Montessori changed education. Children was learning. It's no longer learning by route, but looking at patterns of words and how phonics, etc. Florence Nightingale changed the entire nursing industry, where nursing was thought of little more than a servant or a caretaker, and therefore was all about that, like a cleaner, where she changed nursing from being a cleaner to an industry, and therefore she changed the whole idea of nursing, and therefore she was a social entrepreneur in her time. So social entrepreneurship have always existed. It's just it's only now been recognized as a field of study. And therefore, in the document that you read, that you were required to read anyhow, Gregory Dees actually pointed out that the social entrepreneurs are one species in a genus entrepreneur, and Lindbergh actually identified all three, and therefore they are the persons who have a social mission and they play change roles in the social sector. They do that by adopting a mission to create and sustain social value. So it's all about sustainable social value. Therefore, when it affects social change, it must be sustainable. It's not about charity. Charity is just a plaster to a sore. It's about actually creating sustained value. It's about recognizing and relentlessly pursuing new opportunities to serve that mission. And therefore, it's constantly being innovated, scanning your environment and looking for opportunities to create sustainable change. And therefore, this is where the flexibility and the calculated risk comes in. It's about engaging in a process of continuous innovation, adaptation, and learning. The learning organization again inside of here. So it's about that entrepreneurship aspect of it, and therefore be continuously innovative. It's about acting boldly without being limited by resources currently in hand, and that's where the calculated risk comes in. The entrepreneur don't always need to have everything in hand. All he needs to know is the direction. He has something, he knows all the network, and therefore he knows where to get it, not necessarily have it, and therefore he works towards it. It's about, and here's where the difference actually is between a social and a business entrepreneur. The exhibiting of the heightened accountability to constituencies served for the outcome created. Unlike a business entrepreneur who is accountable only to shareholders, the social entrepreneur, on the other hand, is accountable to all parties. They are accountable to their customers, to the funders, to the public, to their board. They are accountable. So their level of accountability for the social entrepreneur is much more than the level of accountability for a business entrepreneur. And therefore, Ashoka, and that's here we're talking about Gregory Dees Bildreaton, he said that just like entrepreneurs change the face of business, because of course we've had people who change the face of business. And if we think about Apple and we think about IBM, so those people actually who created Apple, people who created IBM, they, I mean, they changed the face of business. Of course, innovation came in that industry because remember, before in the IT environment, it was about IBM machines, and it was way back then. It was about DOS, and therefore the whole idea of coming up with the Windows interface actually came in. Of course, we all know a little bit of the history in terms of that and unethical practices that went on, but notwithstanding, there was some level of innovation, and then of course Dell came into the market and Dell innovated the process. So Dell said, okay, well, I can customize your machine and make it however you want it, and therefore you could get anything that you want in a computer machine. So therefore, innovation and therefore be a change agent. And therefore, just as entrepreneurs change the face of business, the social entrepreneur are change agent for society. And therefore, locally here, if we think about Clive Panton and the work that he did with Field, therefore, change in terms of he did not depend on charity and he looked to create fundraising. And locally, right here next door to us, we have the Living Water community, and therefore these people are change agents. So while a business entrepreneur might create new industry, a social entrepreneur come up with new solution to create social problem and therefore implement these on a wide scale. Arthur Brooke, in his book on social entrepreneurship, he talks about the social entrepreneurs addressing social problems or social needs not met by private markets or government. So generally, the social-based organization on the whole tend to address the fallout, the social fallouts that, or the people who are not addressed by governments and or people who are negatively impacted by the activities of the business environment or even the activities of government. So therefore, social problems or needs that arise by markets or by government policies, etc., or political interventions, etc., these people actually look to create sustainable change. So, from a political standpoint, we all know about Mahatma Gandhi, and therefore he changed the whole nation in terms of India. And we all know about Martin Luther King, and therefore these people are in fact social entrepreneurs who change stuff. They are actually motivated by social benefits, so it was never about money for them. It's about creating social value, so therefore it's about having a social mission, and it is about being entrepreneurial. And of course, we know that in both cases they were relentless in their social mission. And now, of course, as a social entrepreneur, even as an entrepreneur, whereas we entrepreneurs very seldom box their head against a brick wall. If they see the brick wall, then they would look to see if there's a crack in the brick wall. Or then if there's a crack in the brick wall, then they will look to say, okay, so who can I get and who can help me to widen that crack? So it's about working with market forces. It's about seeing opportunities, and therefore if there's opportunities in any way, therefore it's about creating that opportunity, and therefore it's combining a social purpose with a financial purpose. Unlike business, where they're all about creating financial value for shareholders, a social entrepreneur is about creating social value for society. And of course, in doing that, they have to be able to cover their costs. So, therefore, it's also about being financially sustainable. Now, the field of social entrepreneurs or entrepreneurship, actually, as I mentioned before, have always existed. Um, we are all familiar with monks way back when in their mission and missions and missionaries, and they raise funds, they sell their bread, they sell their wines, they sell anything to be able to make some money to cover their cost. And therefore, these social entrepreneurs have always existed. Now, the documentation of the field started simultaneously in the American environment and in the European environment. And you would have done microeconomics and macroeconomics in Caribbean business environment, and therefore you would understand the difference in economics in the American environment against the economics in the European environment. And of course, in the American environment is purely capitalist, whereas in the European environment, it's tinted a little bit with regards to socialism. So there's more a social conscience in the European environment than in the American context. And therefore, the documentation of the field of social entrepreneurship actually started simultaneously in two contexts. So in the American context, charity has always existed, and we are all familiar with Boxing Day. Boxing Day is basically the rich celebrated well on Christmas Day, and therefore the extra food was about boxing the extra food and giving it to charity. So it is about the rich having their wives and trying to their wives needed to get something to do, and therefore they were helping the poor. That's what's their job. So they will raise funds for the help the poor, or they will depend on their husbands who have big business, who will give big donations to be able to support them. So it's really about charity. It's about giving somebody something. So of course, with the economic downturn, what you find happening is that those donations started to shrink. So non-profit organizations had to do a couple of things. They therefore had to earn their income. And hence the reason why in the American context, you had what is called a social enterprise school. So the social enterprise school is about a non-profit organization either commercializing their existing services or starting an organization which is a purely commercial organization to help address the social issue, to pay the cost for the social value. Which, if we look right here in Trinidad and Tobago, we live in water community right next door. They do a couple of that. So they've got a television station which help broadcast what they're doing, but the television station is also earning income for them through advertisement. So while the television station is broadcasting part of their mission, they are commercializing it also, and therefore earning income through advertisements, etc. And then from a purely commercial standpoint. You've got the restaurant, you've got the bookstore, and those are commercial endeavors that is actually generating funds for them to be able to address their social problems. So what their social mission is about addressing the poor and the needy in the area of Port of Spain. So they provide food, they provide clothing to people, the poor in the Port of Spain area. They also operate the hospice. So therefore, those funds that they accrue there is actually addressed that way. So the social enterprise school is basically about the organization commercializing their programs and also earning income. Now, in the American environment, also, and this is actually based on the work of Bill Drayton. When Bill Drayton came onto the field, and the work of Ashoka and Bill Drayton actually, he started noting the work of the individual. So he started looking at the person. How did this person address the social problem? So he started looking at the action of the person and whether or not this person addressed the social problem in an innovative way. And for him, it means that the business model for change should be able to be replicated. So if you create effective change using this process here, I can take this model, put it into another environment, and this model should also work. So social innovation school actually emphasize the individual and look at what the individual has done. And of course, in Trinidad and Tobago, we've got a number of individuals who has done a lot. The guy from Vision on a Mission, we all know what he has done, and therefore he changed the whole idea of the halfway house for prisoners. So whereas prisoners, when they leave prison, they had nowhere to go, society wasn't willing to accept them. He said, okay, because what was happening is that society is unwilling to accept them. Nobody wants to be able to employ them. He said, well, okay, instead of you going back in the street and therefore this cycle continues, and that's being chance, instead of the cycle continuously, there's a continuous cycle, how about I now help you? So I now have a halfway home. You have time now to settle back into society. And if society don't want to give you a job, I will get a job for you. And therefore you will work under my organization. Of course, when they work, they have to pay back a portion of their money to him for operating expenses, etc. So addressing all of that, so Brain Chance basically is an example of a social entrepreneur. Therefore, he created an effective change and he did it in an innovative way. While he is still heavily dependent on subvention from the government, but slowly he's commercializing some of the stuff that he is doing. So he's moving towards commercialization. Now, let's go across to the European environment. So in the European environment, they recognize that you have to create value, social value, and of course, you've got to cover your costs, and that's kind of like where the cooperative movement came from, and the idea that we all together can approach something from a holistic standpoint and create an effect change. And of course, the person who started the cooperative movement, he or she was an entrepreneur, or it can be a group of people. And therefore, in the European context, it was not about celebrating the individual, it was celebrating the action of an organized group of people to be able to effect change. So when this change was done at a community level, it was referred to as the work integrated social enterprise, and that's the WISE movement. So it's about providing people with jobs to help them satisfy their need. To some extent, Wayne Chance might be aligned to that. It's about providing people with jobs. And therefore, it's about boosting their self-esteem, and therefore it's about creating self-sustaining individuals. So I can take you out of welfare, I can give you a job, I can raise your self-esteem, and therefore you become a productive member of society. And therefore it's not necessarily about being innovative in the way that they do it, it's about reaching as much people as possible from a community standpoint. The EMES approach actually was a little different. It said, yes, I'm going to create social change, but I'm going to tackle a couple of things. But when I'm doing it, I'm going to emphasize some innovation. So it's actually EMEA stand for the emergence of the social enterprise in Europe. And therefore, just like the social enterprise schools started up in the American environment, the EMES, or the emergence of the social enterprise, also started in the European context. But the emphasis here in the European context is about non-profit organizations, and non-profit organizations being innovative in the way that they are doing. So in the American context and the European context, there was innovation demonstrated. So, but in the American context, the Social Innovation School celebrated the individual. In all the other schools, the social enterprise, the EMES, and the WISE approach celebrated the work of the organization in creating social value. The social enterprise school in the American context is about earning income to cover cost and therefore address the social problem. So it's not about innovation, it's about actually covering my costs and addressing my value. Social innovation is about doing it and being innovative in the way that you actually do it. In the in the European context, the EMES school appeared to marry the best of the social innovation and the social enterprise school. And therefore, it's about now pulling all of that together. I'm innovative in the way that I'm doing. I'm earning some income, but I'm not going to emphasize fully in terms of earning income. So I could have a mix of donations together with earned income, and therefore be able to do that. So if we want to look now at Wayne Chance again, he might be aligned to the EMES school because he's doing some earned income. He is getting some subventions, etc. He's getting some donations, etc. Running some fundraisers. And therefore, he might be aligned to the EMES approach. The WISE approach is a broad base in terms of helping people get jobs, and therefore addressing it in that way. So these are the 4 schools of thought, and you will be required to reflect on this because in your case assignment, one of the questions that you are going to be asked is, what school of thought do you believe was applied in that case study? And therefore, when you do that, I would expect you to come back here and identify the school of thought and identify why you believe that school of thought was in fact applied. Right, so in total, social entrepreneurship, the mission of the social entrepreneur is to create social value. There's, of course, difference we saw as I was talked about before. The innovation school is about celebrating the individual, the social entrepreneur. The social enterprise school is about collective action of a group of people. And therefore, both the social innovation school and the social enterprise school was about creating social value. The emphasis today from the EMES school is about having a double bottom line. Well, of course, both the social innovation and, the innovation school, the emphasis is not about the double bottom line, but it's about creating social value. So the double bottom line is with the EMES school, the WISE school, and the social enterprise school. So therefore, it is about creating social and financial mission. So at all points in time, you're creating social value, but while you are doing it, you are financially viable while doing it. In the social enterprise school, it's about earn income to cover my full costs. In the EMES school, it's about a combination of earned income together with other revenue streams to be able to address it. This social enterprise school is about earn income to create social value, no emphasis on innovation. The EMES school is about being innovative in addressing the social mission and covering its costs with a mix of revenue streams. The WISE approach, no emphasis on innovation, but in this case, you may find multiple missions, and therefore you are addressing multiple stuff at the same point in time because you are actually addressing community stuff, and therefore they were going into a community and addressing the multiple issues. And by doing that, they are providing people with jobs to change around their life. So for those of you who are using some of the case studies from online, Jarabashi actually had a number of them which was addressing the WISE approach from that perspective. Now, because you had that blurring there in terms of different schools of thought, you had a number of authors now who are trying to pull all of that together. So Alec Young and Alec McNichol and Rowena Young, in their book on social entrepreneurship, they define social entrepreneurship, kind of put a boundary around it, and they said that social entrepreneurship is the product of any individual, organization, or network activity that demonstrate some element of sociality, social mission, innovation, emphasis on mission, and market orientation, irrespective of its legal form. So whether it could be a non-profit or it could be a for-profit, or resource strategy, whether it's of, as I mentioned, profitative or for-profit, voluntary, etc., or sectorial home, public, private, and civil society. So here is where they start blurring the boundary. Once you start mixing the resource strategy and the sectorial home and talking about social entrepreneurship in the private context, or if it's here's where the blurring comes in. Because what you may find happening and what has been happening is that there is a blurring between what is considered corporate social responsibility, green businesses, and social entrepreneurship. So in a number of cases, and for those of you who have gone on YouTube, etc., and look at examples of social entrepreneurs, and in fact, I've seen a number of documentation here, even in Trinidad, there was a magazine at one point in time celebrating social entrepreneurship, and really and truly what they were celebrating was people with green business. And therefore, it's about people who are creating green business for their commercial or their private gain. And while they are addressing a social issue, was about personal gain and not about the social mission solely. And therefore, there is in fact what Alec did here is kind of blur the boundary a little bit in terms of corporate social responsibility, um, uh, green business, and social entrepreneurship. So next session, actually, we will look at some of that blurring of the boundary and kind of clear up that differences a little bit here. But while he did do that, later on in his in the book, he did in fact come back and try to carry it up a little bit, because he says that in reality, the social entrepreneurship is not the product of a single individual. So again, he's not aligned to the innovation school. He seems to be aligned with the EMES school, but ideas generated, propagated, and operationalized by groups, networks, formal and informal groups. And their focus is on change, and therefore they're changing social and cultural arrangement. So therefore, again, he is emphasizing social change, while he put a distinction between social and cultural, because cultural is in fact social again, but through a participative structure. So again, he himself, again, and even this definition here, he did not put a distinction between for-profit, non-profit, private, etc. So it still, in fact, kind of had a blurring of the boundary, which we would address in our next session. In total, though, through looking at a number of different authors in the field, Gregory Dees, Jarabashi, Kim Alter, these are people who have been working in the field, a number of researchers, etc. And in total, in terms of looking at all of the works of these authors, the social entrepreneur basically is the same as a business entrepreneur. They must look at opportunity. And therefore, when they look at opportunity to create social value, it is, of course, not about economic value. It is about creating social value. So while they look at creating be financially viable, because they have to cover their cost, but it's all about the social mission. And so profit basically is not the emphasis of the social entrepreneur. Profit is used to cover costs, and profit is used to extend the value chain of the social entrepreneur and therefore extend their mission. And therefore, the social entrepreneur are change agents in the social sector. They are reformers, they are revolutionaries, and therefore they create massive change. They make fundamental change. It is not about charity, it is simply not about just doing good, it is about creating social change. Their visions are bold, just like a business entrepreneur. When they have a vision, not all of us can see it, their visions are bold. They attack the underlying cause of the problems. It's not about charity, charity is just a plaster. And therefore, they address the cause and not the symptoms. and therefore they try to reduce social issues and address it that way. So they seek to create systematic change and sustainable development. Okay. So the social entrepreneur, most nonprofit organizations are started by people who have a social mission. In most cases, these organizations are operated by social workers. The social workers are not necessarily social entrepreneurs. A social worker is someone who have a social cause. They see a social problem and they want to address that problem. The entrepreneur or the social entrepreneur, on the other hand, is someone who wants to address that, but in the back of his head, he has to operate in a particular way because he has a double bottom line mission. Social workers simply have a single mission. They have a social mission. The social entrepreneur have a double mission. They have a social mission and a financial mission. So traditional nonprofit organizations are operated mainly by social entrepreneurs, people who really want to do good, people who do have a social heart and they really would like to do good. Unfortunately, doing good is not sufficient to operate a nonprofit organization. A nonprofit organization is exactly as a business organization. There's a product. They are creating a product, which means that they've got processes, which means that they've got systems. So you have to manage all of that system. So you have to operate business like. And in most cases, social workers are not trained to operate business like, which could be one of the reasons why the majority of nonprofit organizations suffers because they don't know how to operate like a business. A social enterprise, on the other hand, are an organization created by social entrepreneurs, and therefore it is an enterprising nonprofit organization, and it operates just like a business, of course, with a double bottom line. So the social entrepreneur, and if you look at the characteristics of the social entrepreneur, it's the same entrepreneur orientation. They must be innovative. You must have an internal locus of control, meaning that you are achievement oriented. You must be independent. So, in fact, the social entrepreneur is really a social entrepreneurial orientation. So, whereas the business entrepreneur, we look at the entrepreneurial orientation in terms of opportunity driven, creative, innovative, a little bit in terms of risk taking. Same thing as the social entrepreneur, but in this case, the opportunity is not for economic value, but for social value. So the opportunity in both cases are different. One is about economic value, and this is about community awareness and social concern, which is about social value. So, in fact, the difference between a social entrepreneur and a business entrepreneur is simply their mission. And therefore, social entrepreneurs, they are people who see opportunity to create social value, and therefore, which just means that it's unmet social need. So they do have a strategic mission, they do have a strategic vision, and their mission, of course, is to create social value and not economic value. And therefore, a social entrepreneur, they are innovative in a way that they solve social problem and they do it to create sustainable social value. And the vehicle or the organization that they create, of course, are social enterprise. And therefore, what they do, they address the social ills, which means they look at the disadvantages of society, the underprivileged, the part of society that is ignored, and therefore they try to address those social issues in a sustainable way. The process of social entrepreneurship is very much like the process of entrepreneurship, which you learned in ENTP 210. So the first thing that the entrepreneur will do is look for an opportunity. And how do you look for an opportunity? And therefore, in ENTP 210, we know that an opportunity is really about demand and supply, right? From economics, you also learned about that. And therefore, there's somebody who has a need and you have the resources to match that need. So therefore, it's about in a social environment, it's somebody have a social need, and I have the assets in which I could address that need. So it becomes a promising idea or an opportunity when there is both demand and supply. So in the social context, demand, social need, and of course, the asset is what I have and the resources that I have, whether it's my personal experiences, etc., or networking, etc. And therefore, I have the resources to address that social need, so it now becomes a feasible opportunity. Once it becomes a feasible opportunity, then of course, what we do, we would have come up with a business concept. And in your business concept, you have to identify your social mission. Just like a business, what's my strategic intent? What's my goals, objective? And in the social environment, it's referred to as your social impact theory or your social theory of change. And therefore, you identify what is your social theory of change or your social impact theory. And once I know what is my vision and mission, then I have to operationalize it. So I need to operationalize it, and therefore, how am I going to operate it? What resources do I need? What functions do I need, etc. And therefore, I operationalize it. And of course, my intention is to address the opportunity and create social impact. So if you look at it, this process of social entrepreneurship is very much like the process of business entrepreneurship. Difference, only difference is about social value. So put it from a different perspective again. And this is actually looking at it now from what we will be doing in class. You will be required to do an ecosystem or map an ecosystem. And if you are creating a new business or a new social enterprise, sorry, then it's about looking for opportunity in the environment for that. If you are extending the value chain of an existing organization, it is about looking at the ecosystem of the existing organization to identify opportunities. And of course, opportunities are social problems and of course unmet need. The next step would have been, of course, when you identify the opportunity, you have to state your strategic intent. That's in the business context. In the social context, it's once I've identified my opportunity, I then state what is my theory of change, and therefore, which is really the strategic intent, which is my business concept, which is my concept in the social environment. So, who am I doing this for? What are they going to how they are going to actually benefit? How am I actually going to be able to do it? And what product or programs am I going to do? So therefore, this is my theory of change. And once I do that, identify what it is I plan to do, then I gotta operationalize it, right? So which means I am looking at my resources. So what kind of HR requirement, what kind of operational requirements, and therefore what kind of financial requirement, and therefore what do I currently have, and what do I actually need to get, and therefore if I don't have everything, who can I get it from? So therefore in terms of other institutes, so is there some organization I can network with, or some organization I can leverage to be able to get it? So therefore that's the whole idea of planning. And then for us here in class, that's kind of like what you have to do. So once you are in an existing organization and you have to either scale, meaning you are extending their value chain, come up with the same thing in terms of identify their resources, etc. So that a small mini business plan. If you are creating your own social enterprise, that's actually what you have to do, is the business plan for that particular social idea. And then of course it is about, once you implement, then of course it's about scaling. Of course, if you are doing a new business, that's outside our scope, but for an existing organization, it's about scaling. And scaling means that you're scaling deep or scaling wide. Scaling deep simply means you're improving existing processes to facilitate change, and scaling wide means I'm extending my value chain through creation of new product. And in all cases, what I want to do is, of course, to be able to create value. Now, one of the key difference between a social enterprise and a business enterprise is this idea of social value. Unlike a business, on the other hand, when you create sustainable economic value, you continue to operate. On the other hand, in a social enterprise, if you create sustainable social value, mean you solve the social problem. So if you solve the social problem, it means there's no need for you to actually continue to exist. So that's the kind of difference between the two of them also. So in most cases, what happens in non-profit organization, if they don't close down, they just shift their mission and address something new. And therefore, the goal is about creating sustainable social change, and therefore, change in one context against changing in another context. Right, so that's it. Again, as a quick reminder for those who have not as yet addressed the requirements in the forum, please do that. And for those who have not placed their location information, etc., please do that. I will be forming groups. I will put the names of the group members based on the information you provided on the forum. And once I form the group, you will be required to do your team charter. I will put a mini video on the requirements for the team charter. And once I provided the team, you'll have 1 week in which to produce this team charter for me. So please, if you have not as yet addressed the forum, kindly do that. I believe I have it set to close on the 4th. And therefore it's, yeah, um, please do that. So for those of you who are celebrating Carnival, be safe. For those who are not, well, have a nice quiet day at home until I see you again. Okay.